is its true meaning. Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Sound okay? Wonderful. So first, on this full moon day, I'm really incredibly grateful to be with you all and spend the day in Dharma study and practice. We began our day in Fusatsu this morning. And following on this month of diving into the precepts, last week Kozan talked about the atonement and repentance, and then a beautiful, fun exploration of the fifth precept of lying or not lying. Then the three chariots of the Lotus Sutra and birds aren't real. And so that's really stuck with me. And I was hoping by now I'd have some stickers, but we're not there yet because shopping's also not real. We had a seminar the following day where we got into a lively discussion about the spirit of the precepts and, well, what if I believe in, local shopping, but I'm still shopping on Amazon? What's that mean? And maybe it was somehow decided that I should only shop on Amazon one day a week. And, I'm doing pretty well at that after a couple of days. So thank you, Kozan, for that. And yeah, it's just been so fun and edifying to go deeply into these and with all of you and in conversation, and knowing that as we're doing that, we're also in this process of so on. And Shoryu, we're stamping the Rakusus, like, what was it, 40 Rakusus we had? And with Monshin, finished the ancestors charts. Melissa was putting everything together, and we'll be sending those out shortly for our Jukai recipients. Some of you are here. I think you still have some things to finish, but we'll get there. So all of that's happening now, and we're preparing for Jukai on March 10th. And this morning, who saw the moon this morning before? Yeah, incredible. As I was coming down the hill, I saw it was like those kind of a cloud bank of purple clouds over the Sangre de Cristos, and the moon is just like seeming to rise, streaming. It seemed brighter than, in the dark night. And I was like, oh yes, Fusatsu's today, wonderful. And that moon, for us in Zen, it symbolizes enlightenment, right? And I was reflecting on that. Why is that? Why is it enlightenment? I asked Kozan, why is it enlightenment? And there's so many reasons, of course, but just the reflections that came to my mind were, it's when you see it in its full glory, it's just breathtaking, right? And if it's right on the horizon, it looks huge, kind of against any foreground objects. It just completely dwarfs everything. But most of the time, it's not in our sight. It's not in our view. We don't think about it. It's often shadowed by the earth. It's often shadowed by clouds. It's often somewhere where we can't see it. And yet it's always there. It's always affecting us, right? And we know the tides of the moon, and it's unclear whether or how the moon is actually affecting our physical bodies, but many traditions believe that it's affecting us. And in full moons, there are more accidents happen, and people bleed more, and all kinds of things. And so I don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised if there was some real effect that the physical moon has. And yet most of the time it's out of our awareness. And so maybe enlightenment or awakening is like that it's always there. It's always behind something. Most of the time, it's just out of reach or out of sight, or we don't remember it. But then when we do catch a glimpse, either we're sitting, staring at the horizon, waiting for the moon to rise, urging it to rise, don't fall asleep. Here it comes, I know it. And maybe it comes, maybe it doesn't. Maybe there's clouds that morning. And sometimes you don't even think about it. You're just going about your day and blows you away. So the moon's always symbolized this awakening, at least in our tradition. And And then also on full moon days, as we did today, we renew our precepts. And that's an ancient Buddhist tradition going back from the early Buddhist days of renewing the precepts on the full moon. And I think they also do it on the quarter moon and the half moon. There's many other ways, but it's definitely on the full moon. And I was wondering, why is that? Why is it the full moon? And it seems like, well, probably it's because there was a lunar calendar at that time, and that was a way to keep count of when you're going to do it. You want to do it regularly. You want to renew your precepts and remember. So you do it on the full moon. But I'd like to think that there's some connection there, and I wasn't able to find a literary evidence for this, but connection between enlightenment and the precepts. And I was reflecting on, like, what am I going to talk about for this talk? We've talked about the refuges, atonement, some of the precepts, the three ways of viewing, the three perspectives. And I thought, well, I probably should talk about the three pure precepts next. And I have to admit, they've never been the thing that caught me, like, oh, the three pure precepts, I want to study those, Because when I first read them, it was like, okay, don't do evil, do good for others. They all sound like the same thing. I got that, that obviously makes sense. Moving on. Well, how about these grave precepts? And so, but obviously the tradition holds them as very, very highly, right? The pure precepts, and they're at the core of our practice. So that's where I need to go. I need to look into that. So a little bit of exploration of these pure precepts. And I was thinking about, it seems like, and I'm not sure where I read this or heard this, but I have this kind of belief that the precepts are the actions or way of thinking or way of life that arise from an awakened mind or an awakened nature, when it manifests. So we all have awakened nature. And when we realize it, when we truly grok it, we act in a certain way. And that way, we generally, and it's like, never say never, but generally we act in a certain way, and that way is the precepts, is the Buddha way. And whether it's the 10 precepts that we have, or the 16 precepts that we have, or the 48 Bodhisattva precepts, or the 258, articles of Vinaya, that those precepts are an expression of that awakening. And so, as I was thinking about that and reading it, of course, it seems like that is an agreed upon notion. Because, okay, I'm skipping a little bit. Because of what? Well, it's hard to talk about what you realize when you wake up, right? Because it's actually talking about the precepts. The fourth, like, really grave precept in the early Buddhist teaching is not to boast about your experiences or realization, right? So it's like, don't kill people, don't steal things, don't have sex if you're a monk, and don't boast about your realization. These four are called the parajika. I hope I'm saying that right. The parajika infractions. And if you do them, you immediately disrobe, and you cannot become a monk again in this lifetime. So they're very serious, right? And so you think about it like, okay, don't boast about your realization is that serious. So of course there's a tendency for people not to talk about their realization. And it doesn't say don't talk about it, right? It says don't boast about it. So there's an element of pride and so on. And it makes sense that to protect your own mind, to protect your own kind of humility, not to talk about those things except with very close people or with your teacher. But fortunately, the Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, who became the Buddha, talked about his awakening. And I was very curious to read again, what exactly did he wake up to on that night? And then me being me, I just was, okay, what day was it exactly? So they say it was some accounts say it was in May, some accounts say it was the 8th day of the 12th month of the year, which would have been in the lunar calendar, but we call it December 8th. So Rohatsu is the celebration of that awakening, also called Bodhi Day. And by some accounts, it was in 528 BCE, which is exactly 2,550 years ago. So on that night, and I didn't calculate it by the Gregorian, not that bad. This happened. So the Buddha, I think most people know the story, and I won't go into the kind of what led him there, but he eventually found himself under the Bodhi tree with complete determination. I will not move until I realize what is to be realized. And maybe he didn't even know what that meant, but he had a sense. There's something to be realized. There's some liberation. There's some truth I must see. And I'm not moving from the seat until that happens. And so it's said, and this is the Mahasachaka Sutta from the Pali Canon, in the first watch of the night, in deep concentration, he saw 5 of his past lives, then 10, then 100, then 500, then innumerable of his own past lives, reaching back for eons and eons and eons. And that was the first knowledge of his awakening, is to have that sense of the hugeness, the vastness of his own mind stream, right? And we talk about, oh, there's no self, but sure, there's no self as you think of yourself, maybe. But according to the Buddha's enlightenment, there is a mind stream that is endless from beginningless time, that contains the seeds of your karma. And so in the second watch of the night, his concentration deepened, his focus increased, and he was then able to see with the divine eye the past lives of countless beings. I don't know if it was all beings, but just countless beings. He saw all of their past lives. Imagine the innumerable lives going back into eons. And when he saw all of their lives, he saw simultaneously, like in the one Nen eon, in the moment, he saw the connections between their actions and the consequences of their actions, right? So he was able to see the law of cause and effect, karma at work, right, in real time. I mean, in the sense of all of the past lives, of seeing them. And it's said that only a Buddha could really understand karma. And so we have these stories passed down, like, well, if you're greedy, you're going to become a worm, or if you're mean, you're going to become, whatever, a mad dog or something. Nothing against dogs. I've been barked at a lot today, so. So he saw all of these countless lives of all these beings, and saw the karmic connections, and therefore he realized what we now call the links of dependent origination, the chain of causality. And I won't go into that. It's quite a teaching on how everything's connected, and it's of course a translation from what he saw, because what he saw is incomprehensible to ordinary mind, but we get some gist of it. So that was the second knowledge that he perceived, was the karma of all beings, and therefore the cycle of suffering. So he saw how beings would act in a certain way, and that would cause, be the cause for future incarnations and future consequences of those actions over and over and over again. And that beings constantly were seeking for happiness and constantly doing the opposite of what would really bring them happiness, through ignorance, basically. And he saw all this. And then in the third watch of the night, he directed his mind towards this suffering and how to end it. I mean, he's just there in this like supreme samadhi, divine eye, seeing everything. And then what occurs to him is like, how do we stop this? How do we end this suffering? And it arose in him the answer, which comes to us now as the Four Noble Truths. This is suffering. This is the cause of suffering. This is the end of suffering. And this is the pathway to the end of suffering. And in that third watch, this is what arose for him. And I'm not sure, I wasn't able to find, did the whole Eightfold Path, which is the Fourth Noble Truth, come complete just like that? I think it may have, at least, who knows what was coming to him, but the way it kind of came out. And it said that he didn't actually teach for, I think it was 7 weeks after his awakening experience. And he was not sure he was going to. He said, oh, who can understand this? I mean, I'm going to spend my life teaching this and nobody's going to get it. And it's going to be a bummer. And then apparently this God came to him and said, please, please teach. This is really important. People will understand. You will have some. There are those with little dust on their eyes that can learn from you. So he said, okay. And then he went to teach. He found his 5 former disciples who abandoned him when he started eating food. So this was when he was like a total ascetic and just starving himself, and he was eating 1 bean a day and then, just emaciated. So there's these beautiful images, beautiful, in the eye of the beholder, but beautiful, of him just totally just skin and bones, just like raw determination, except just driven. And he realized that this wasn't the way. He was just too sick. And when his former disciples saw him eating some curd and that a woman had given him, they said, "Oh, you're going overboard, Gautama. You're eating some curd." I mean, so they left him. So he found them, and somehow he convinced them that he got it. And I think they like saw him coming down the path, and he was just glowing, and they were just like, "Please teach us," They were like doubtful at first, and they were like, "Please." And he taught them the 4 Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. It was the first turning of the wheel of Dharma. And so how do we take this awakening experience? From a kind of modern scientific point of view, it doesn't make any sense. We don't even believe in past lives, much less the ability to kind of recognize all of these past lives. And so maybe that's not literally true. Maybe it's a metaphor. Maybe it's maybe it's trying to capture in poetry a kind of experience that's so vast as to be incomprehensible. I don't know. I think there have been a lot of accounts of people seeing past lives. I think it could be true, maybe not. In any case, this realization, whatever he actually experienced, led to this expression of the path, right? That this path, the perceptual path, you could call it, the Eightfold Path, was what he discovered. And here's how it's taught, or how it's elucidated. What is this ancient path? The ancient road traveled by the self-awakened ones of former times. Just this noble Eightfold Path. Right view, right aspiration, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. And that's the path. And then there are other formulations which have the 2 reversed, and they're divided into the Shila, Samadhi, Prajna, into ethics, concentration, and wisdom. And then right view and right intention are moved to the end. Interesting to see how they're, but this is the original kind of order. And he says, this ancient path, the ancient road traveled by the rightly self-awakened ones of former times, I followed that path. Following it, I came to direct knowledge of aging and death, direct knowledge of the origination of aging and death, direct knowledge of the cessation of aging and death, and direct knowledge of the path leading to the cessation of aging and death. So it's interesting to note that in this is the Nagara Sutta from Samyutta Nikaya, he says he followed the path to get there, right? And did he know about the Eightfold Path before he had his awakening? Or did he realize the Eightfold Path once he had it? Or maybe he did it without knowing he was doing it. And when he woke up, he realized, that's why I'm waking up right now, is because I followed this path that I was going down all these, I was trying too hard in this direction, and I grew up as like a prince and I had everything that was too much, and then I was too ascetic. So he called it the middle way, right? And in some texts, the Eightfold Path isn't called the Eightfold Path, it's just called the middle way. And so he followed, this is just my guess, is that he kind of followed this path in trying so many things, and then realized, this is the path, this is what I can teach, this is what I can give. And and so in the Zen literature, the awakening is described a little differently. In the Denkaroku, it's said that the Buddha awoke, saw the morning star, and said, I and all beings simultaneously realize the way. And it's a beautiful Buddhayana or intrinsic take on that realization. It's like there is no awakening separate from others. It's like inherently a Mahayana sort of take on it as well. And then, but it's interesting that he says, realize the way, right? What is this way? And it's often said, the way is the Tao. The Tao can mean many things. Is it a way of seeing reality as it is? In the early Pali text, they have this phrase that it just keeps popping in my mind, yata bhuta jnanadasana, to know and see reality as it is. Yata bhuta jnanadasana. And then that, I think, is like what drew me, honestly, to study and practice of Buddhism, was like, I want to know reality. I want to see the truth. Give me the truth, give me the real stuff. And that the way is the way of seeing, right? And precepts, okay, we have to do the precepts so that we can be clear and, and calm, cool, Shila, be clear and cool, which is the foundation for like good samadhi, which is the foundation for realizing wisdom. Like that's the stepwise approach. And I never really considered, the way perhaps is like a way of living. It's a way of life. And that, just following the precepts is enlightenment. I'm like, yeah, sure, practice is enlightenment. Yeah, I get all that. And give me the truth, It's really, part of me is like, that's just a tool to let go of grasping onto enlightenment. But, put that aside, give me the enlightenment. And as you can tell, it's a quandary for me. It's a living koan. It's like the thing of, well, do you practice to realize? Do you realize to practice? If you're already a Buddha, why do you practice? I think this is something that we shouldn't let go of. We shouldn't stop chewing on. And this is the same thing. What is the way? Is the awakened way a way of seeing, a way of being, perhaps both? And so now I come to the title I gave, which I have to admit was completely clickbait. Contours of the Awakened Mind. And I said it to Kozan, and he was like, okay. And which is the deserved response. And of course, I say this tongue in cheek, because if I was actually like, so here's what it's like to be awakened, that would be breaking that fourth precept, and I should disrobe immediately. But I think, but I'm actually being serious, because from this view, the contours of the awakened mind are the precepts. Living the awakened way is not so much about seeing reality in a certain way. I mean, maybe it is, but it's really from the outside, it's living a certain way, a way of refraining from unwholesome action, of doing wholesome action, and of helping others. And so I think it was either before or right after I thought of this that I was reading in Being Upright, Tenshin Reb Anderson. It says something very similar. I love this. Okay, don't laugh. The three pure precepts describe the structure and fundamental design of the enlightened mind. The three pure precepts describe the structure and fundamental design of the enlightened mind. That's just so cool to me. That's like my kind of clickbait, right? Show me the structure of the enlightened mind. If I didn't read the three pure precepts part and I just saw a book that said the structure and design of the enlightened mind, I mean, that would be the thing that would attract me, right? And, in some Tibetan texts, you really get stuff like that. And it describes in beautiful detail, like all of these things. And it's really, can be overwhelming. And it can sometimes click you into a state, So nothing against that, but just in light of, my title and kind of the cheekiness of it, this was like, oh, that's what I'm talking about. What is that? And if the answer is refrain from bad, do good for the others, that is the structure and design of the enlightened mind. It's like, but what about the superpowers and, the vision of the divine vision and past lives and do good? It's like, somehow it's a letdown, but only to that part of myself that wants something more, So this reminds me of a story. I don't know if it's a koan in any of the collections, but this story about the Bird's Nest Zen Master. Have you heard about the Bird's Nest Zen Master? So Bai Juyi was a great poet of Tang. When he was officiating as governor in a certain district, there was a Zen master there within his jurisdiction, and he was called Nyauko, or Bird's Nest, because he would practice meditation on a seat made of thickly growing branches of a tree. So he literally lived in it like a little tree house. So one day, the governor poet visited him and said, "Isn't it dangerous up there?" And Nyauko looked down and said, "Your position is far worse than mine." And the governor said, "Well, I'm the governor of this district. I don't see any danger here." And Nyauko said, "Oh, really? When your passions burn and your mind is unsteady, what is more dangerous than that? When your passions burn and your mind is unsteady, what is more dangerous than that?" And I just picture the governor going, I was just trying to make small talk. I don't know why he had to say something like that. Okay, better get to the point. So, Master Nyauko, what is the essence of Buddhism? Of course, classic kind of question, coming to the master, find out. Nyauko says, refrain from evil, practice all good, and purify the mind. This is the teaching of all Buddhas. And the magistrate said, well, any child can say that, or any 3-year-old child, he said, knows that. Do good, stop evil, purify the mind. I mean, I don't know, purify the mind, but then the master said, well, any child 3 years old may know it, but even an 80-year-old man finds it difficult to practice. And that was it. That's the story. And it's quoted a lot because he brings in that, that ancient phrase, which is the origin of our 3 pure precepts. And this phrase is from the Dhammapada, and it goes exactly like that: refrain from evil, or refrain from causing harm, practice good, purify the mind. This is the teaching of all Buddhas. And so, as you can see from our pure precepts, the purify the mind was changed out for the kind of Mahayana, do good for others, help others. And it's an interesting choice. Of course, purify the mind is still in there, especially in the way we formulate the following 10 precepts as the 10 pure mind practices, or maybe you could call them the 10 purifying mind practices. So purifying the mind, doing good for others. And I just love that, if it was a Zen monk or something, he wouldn't have said, well, any 3-year-old could say that, right? He would have been like, oh, that's, but to kind of, what's it called? The emperor's new clothes. If he's like, well, isn't that just obvious? And Yoko's like, yes, but have you done it? It's like, maybe it is obvious. Are you doing it? Are you following the precepts? Oh, these precepts are easy. Are they? And to keep that question alive, I think maybe that's what we're awakening to, is the clarity of being able to constantly reflect. Bernie Glassman in Infinite Circle talks about these 3 pure precepts as touchstones that we're constantly coming back to and checking. And as we talked about in seminar last week, can you really think about it all the time? And, no, you probably aren't going to be checking every single action you do. Is this good? Is this refraining from evil? Is this actually for someone else? Or is it only for me? But maybe it's not about that, about this kind of cogitation. Maybe it's a feeling you get. And maybe that feeling you get about whether something's right or wrong, maybe you call it conscience. Maybe it's not other than awakened mind. So, to go back to Infinite Circle, Bernie has a great gloss on this, as he has on so many things in the Dharma. So he says, do good, starting with cease from evil or cease from harm. So he defines this as to stop causing yourself to be more deluded. So to cease from harm is to stop, stop causing yourself to be more deluded. And therefore, if you're less deluded, you'll not harm others. But like the fundamental cause of your harming of others is your own delusion. So what can you do to stop causing yourself, to stop creating the conditions for your own delusion? So some things would be like, if you lie or if you steal something, you're creating the conditions for delusion. Or, illicit, whatever, the intoxicants, the many intoxicants of this world, be they substances or be they media or be they whatever distracts you from reality. And then do good, cause yourself to be less deluded, right? So stop deluding yourself. Now, what can you do to make yourself less deluded? What can you do to wake up? And then do good for others, cause others to be less deluded. So it's all in the context of delusion, which of course makes sense for Bernie from a kind of a more Buddhayana perspective. It all comes down to the root delusion of believing in a separate self or believing in the duality of reality. And then he, I think it's Shohaku Okumura actually, but he talks about wholesome and unwholesome and defines those. So to cause it yourself to be more deluded is unwholesome action, and unwholesome is defined as causing suffering. So it all comes back to the Four Noble Truths and suffering as the defining characteristic of what's wholesome and unwholesome. And that's why I think evil is a strange word, and why we don't use it in the way we talk about the Three Pure Precepts. It's often said, cease from evil, refrain from evil, right? But evil, to me, has this like malevolent intent, like I'm going to cause you harm. And the sense, that does happen, but my belief would be that happens just because of even further delusion. Like there isn't actually someone who's not deluded who wants to cause other people harm, right? That's you could call that the faith in this belief in what's sometimes called innate goodness. There's actually an innate goodness there. And then if there's any harm that's being caused, it's either unintentional or so deluded as basically it's unintentional. And so evil doesn't really fit. So it's like we use these other terms to cease from causing harm, to cease from unwholesome action. And so refraining from unwholesome action, engaging in wholesome action, and helping others. That ends up being the pure precepts, according to Bernie. So and then also in the Jukai ceremony, I believe this is where we say this formulation, which is a beautiful combination of the three tenets of the Zen Peacemaker order with the three pure precepts. And you see them here as either they're identical, they're the same thing, or they're so interconnected as to be inseparable. We say, first, do no harm. I vow not to harm others or myself, and to live in not knowing as the source of all manifestations. So that non-harm and not knowing go together. And that makes sense if you think, well, if you bring your knowing and your opinions and you're trying to shove them down people's throats, delusion is just causing, the suffering of others. But if you can just stop and not know and really be in spaciousness, then at least you can refrain from unwholesome action. Second, do good. I vow to bear witness to the joys and pains of all life and clearly see what is without attachment or judgment. So this is interesting because bearing witness seems passive in a way, at first glance. But to see that Bernie's idea of bearing witness had to do with doing good, about really, this is the purifying the self, causing yourself to be less deluded. So it's an active bearing witness. It's like vipassana, clear seeing. You're really looking intently and seeing what's there, trying to see reality. You're trying to see what's true. Not that there's an ultimate reality that you could say you could see perhaps, but just completely opening up to what's there. And then finally, third, do good for others. I vow to invite all hungry spirits into my life and commit my energy and love to the healing of the earth, humanity, and all beings, including myself. I mean, you could just say that. It's an incredible prayer. And there's even, like different ways of saying, well, what is the third tenet? What did people say? Loving action, compassionate action, action that is arising from not knowing and bearing witness is kind of the primary definition of it, because it's an undefined. Actually, like, it's the appropriate response. The third tenet is to have an appropriate response, which is one based in not knowing and bearing witness. But usually it's looked at as compassionate action, one that's committed to the welfare of all beings. So that's Bernie's reflection on those. And then in Living by Vow, it's just so wonderful to go between these books and the precepts that I'm sure you're studying. Living by Vow, Shohaku Okumura, he doesn't actually have a chapter on the Three Pure Precepts, but he talks about the meal chant. And I just stumbled upon this. I was so happy. I was just like, oh, the meal chant, what does he have to say about that? And there's so much good stuff there. And of course, the meal chant ends with this phrase, which is a little different, which is why I didn't maybe think of it at first. So we say, we eat to end all suffering, to practice good, to save all beings, and to realize the enlightened way. Right? We're holding up our bowls, and we eat to end all suffering, to practice good, to save all beings, and to realize the enlightened way. And then we like slyly look over and see if the teacher has started eating, and then we eat. And so we're always remembering these things. But the first one, we eat to end all suffering, is that the same thing as refrain from evil? Seems a little different, right? It's more like the last one. It's like to help others. And so he has a different, he actually has a different translation of these. And he says the Japanese, which is really cool, because the Japanese actually says the first bite, the second bite, the third bite. So the first bite is to end all evil. The second bite is to bring all beings to the other, sorry, that's the third bite. The second bite is to cultivate every good. The third bite is to bring all beings to the other shore. Together with all beings, we realize the Buddha way. So that's a more literal translation of that. So how did we get from the first bite is to end all evil to we eat to end all suffering? Well, I mean, obviously they're related. If your function or your goal is to end unwholesome action, then you're ultimately ending suffering. So it works, but it's a little bit of a kind of a Mahayana take on that first pure precept. But now I'll remember, when we do those three, this is the three pure precepts again, and it's fun to know in the Japanese, ku is bite. So iku is first bite, niku second bite, and sanku is third bite. So iku, niku, sanku, the three pure precepts. Yeah, so that was from Okumura's Living by Vow. And then finally, time is going fast. I wanted to read from Dogen's Kyoju Kaimon, which we've been delving into as well, as the kind of primary source text for our Jukai ceremony. And he, as usual, has beautiful and mysterious, not totally clear at first glance glosses that are something I just wanted to read and we can sit with. First, ceasing from evil. This is the abiding place of laws and rules of all bodhisattvas. This is the very source of laws and rules of all Buddhas. So that's interesting. What is this about rules and laws with the ceasing from evil? And this harkens back to another formulation of that first precept, which is to embrace and sustain forms and ceremonies. To embrace and sustain forms and ceremonies. Why are the forms important? We're so often asking that in our modern kind of Buddhist way. Why the robes? Why this form? Why not that form? And whatever we decide, and I think everyone agrees, well, the form itself, it's not like whether you turn left or you turn right is actually important, but there's something about doing it together action. There's something about a container, a reliability of, which way to turn, and you don't have to think about it. And there's so much that's been taught about the beauty of ceremonies and forms. But to think of it as, I do ceremonies and forms as a way of stopping unwholesome action is an interesting contemplation worth further reflection. Second, doing good. Dogen says, this is the Dharma of Samyak Sambodhi, ultimate perfect awakening. This is the way of all beings. So doing good is the Dharma of Samyak Sambodhi, is the realization of awakening, is to do good, is to do wholesome action. That's that seeing of the Eightfold Path. The right is good. You can think of it as good livelihood, good intention, and so forth. And third, doing good for others. This is to transcend the profane and to be beyond the holy. This is to liberate oneself and others. So to transcend the profane, so this is when I hear profane, I think of this phrase that the Dharma is going against the stream. So the stream is the profane, the mundane, the regular, samsara is just flowing, and it's like you're in it, and to go against that stream of capitalism and, all the bad isms that we talked about before, it's just, if you don't do anything, you're going to go with the stream. You're going to in that flow. You're just participating. And if you're going to go against it, you're going to fight against the stream. So that is transcending the profane, right? That is doing good for others. The work of a bodhisattva is to swim upstream. But to go beyond the holy, right? So don't be holier than thou. You're not all of a sudden higher because you're going against the stream, and all you schmucks are not, going the wrong way. Hello. You of course you want to try and help grab this one, let's go upstream, come on. But it's not about being better than anyone, right? Roshi often says, what does it mean to be a priest? It means to be on the bottom of the pile, which is interesting because sometimes authority and power and all these things might be foisted upon you. And to remember that it's really about humility. It's about becoming a servant to all beings. And so going beyond the holy. This is to liberate oneself and others. Wow. And so for the first time, Kozan, I have many sheets that I didn't get to. It's amazing. 6:30, and I want to end with the only other story that I could really find about Nyako, the bird's nest master. So I think this story probably says more about the actual contours of the awakened mind than anything I just said. So we can forget everything I said and just listen to this story. So one day, after many years of service, the master's attendant, so he had this wonderful attendant, Hui Tong, he suddenly said, I wish to take my leave. The master said, okay, where are you off to then? And Hui Tong said, well, I left home in order to find Zen, but the venerable monk, you master, have not let fall one single word of instruction all these years. So now it's a question of going here and there to study Zen. I'm going to go find Zen somewhere. And then the master said, well, if it could be said that there is Zen, I also have a little bit here. Whereupon he plucked a feather from his nest and blew it away. And suddenly, Hui Tong understood the deep meaning. Thank you.